Get ready to unlock a slew of actionable takeaways in this podcast, episode 7, season 1 of the Sponsorship X podcast, which is all about ROI. Today, you're going to hear an amazing conversation between Yoeri Geerits of YouGov and Dr. Norma Riley, partner at T1 and the Dean of Business of the Graduate Business School at the University of New England. These two gentlemen are experts in their field, and not only do they know data in real time, they're also going to provide you with a few very interesting perspectives on data analysis in the future. Time to listen to Yoeri and Norm.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is YouGov Day here at Sponsorship X, and we have the pleasure of Yoeri Geerits here with us, who leads, as you heard earlier this morning, the sports part of YouGov and all the research they do. Yoeri and I have known each other for closer to 20 years than 10 now, and our paths have crossed many times. So I'm Norma Riley. I'm a professor and involved in the sports sponsorship industry. So I'm a partner with T1 and also dean and professor at the University of New England's College of Business. So our paths have crossed. We have very, very common interests. So very happy to be here with you this morning, Yoeri, and I hope we'll have some good content for you the next 45 minutes or so. So our topic is real-time data and sponsorship. And we both come from an era when sponsorship evaluation was, years. You'd do it every year and you'd report on it. And the world has really shifted, as we all know. We're going to get into that. Big brands, as we both know. One of the big beverage brands, you could probably name them. In Canada, they collect data from 3,000 Canadians every single day. Right? They're tracking social media. We've got an expert here who's going to talk about that. So that's going to be our topic for this morning. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll try to kind of go from there. So Yoeri, maybe just to kind of kick us off, you've had the chance, you're a dual citizen, as you said earlier, lived in a couple different countries. So talk about your work in Europe, Asia, North America. Where's your favorite place you've been to work and to play in your travels? Just to let us know a little bit about who you are and your background.
Yeah, so I started as a banker. I worked for a large company called ING. So started as an investment banker, and it allowed me to kind of move around the globe quite a bit. Lived in Amsterdam, Taipei, Hong Kong, New York, Atlanta, Toronto, then ended up in Calgary, Brussels, of course. I would say...
Pretty impressive list, by the way.
Thank you. I think the most exciting place to live was Hong Kong, for sure, because it's so different, and you can live in Western countries and you kind of get absorbed by the Caucasian culture, if you want to call it like that. But I don't like being an expat, like live in the expat community. So I always made sure that I really connected with local culture, and I was single, so it really allowed me to travel around very easily and go do triathlons in different parts of of Asia and travel to Japan. And so I would say Asia for sure, because it's so different and so fascinating, and you realize that there's much more than Europe and North America or South America.
And let's dig into that play side of it a little bit first to learn a bit more about you. And you and I are both aging athletes. We talk about this quite a bit, but talk about your favorite place to play. So you kind of talked about Hong Kong as a place to work and to live. If you think about all those places you've been, take work off the table for a second. Where's been your favorite place you've been for the play side of your life?
I have to go back to Hong Kong.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks of Hong Kong as like this concrete big city, but it's actually really small. Like, I lived on Central, which is like little island. The city itself is really small, and so 5 minutes away from my house or my place, we had this amazing forest and jungle, and we would go on Sunday mornings 5 a.m., leave for a 30-kilometer trail run, go to the beach, have breakfast, take taxi back, and done. And so cycling was amazing there. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, because again, it's so different from everything else, and it was so easily accessible, which a lot of people don't really think about when you think about Hong Kong. They think about concrete jungle, but it's actually an amazing place to live.
That sounds wonderful. A jungle, a 30K run, breakfast, a taxi. Sounds like a good Sunday morning to me. So let's move now from the country level to kind of the project level. You've obviously been involved in probably 1,000 plus projects. Tell us about maybe what your favorite or one of your most interesting experiences was from a work project kind of level in all of your travels.
Yeah, so I started as a banker, as I mentioned, and I got really lucky. I was like on a fast track program within a company, and it allowed me to move further, like horizontally, without really affecting my career. And so they asked me to manage the financial aspect of the New York City Marathon.
Mm.
That was their first sponsorship, and I was the only one involved in at HQ in Amsterdam on a sponsorship level, but more mostly from a finance background and project management. And so as we expanded our marathon portfolio, I started becoming like the head of sponsorships at ING. We did all these different marathons, and I did the contract negotiations. And so it was a fascinating role that I kind of rolled into by luck and because I worked hard. Um, and I think the most fascinating part was when we started working on the marathons. Our CEO then, Mr. Kist, we were the fifth largest company on the planet on Forbes. We had the largest leasing company, real estate company, retail bank. And he would always go in a cab and say, "Hey, do you know ING?" And ask the taxi driver. And nobody, like everybody kind of heard about ING. Nobody knew about it. And so the mission was, how can we increase our brand awareness, our brand understanding, and ultimately drive shareholder value? I mean, at the end of the day, that is what it's boiled down to. And I think this is where I really started connecting with market research, because we looked at 10 different platforms. We looked at traditional advertising, traditional media, and then we started looking at 10 different sponsorship platforms. So there was never an intent to go into Formula One. It was just one of the options. And so we looked at Olympics, we looked at sailing, soccer, like you name it, the 10 biggest things on the planet we looked at. And we did a ton of research. We did focus groups. A couple of times I flew around the globe in 7 days to do focus groups in different parts of the world. Fascinating. So we really went all out in figuring out what the right platform was. After a year, we decided to go with Formula One. The whole process of working with the board and the executive team and getting to a point where we had approval to spend, 150 million euros a year on Formula One. It was all backed up by data. Every decision we made was backed up by data, whether it was media values or media valuation or assessment of the best locations or viewership. The internal working with the 7 different business lines and understanding their objectives and key metrics. I think it's been mentioned in Harvard as one of the best case studies in sponsorship and execution and how we got there. And I can stand behind it. And of course, I was managing it, but we used a lot of really, really smart people. And for me, that was like going back to university and learning how properly set up the right sponsorship. And of course, we had a lot of money, but
Right.
we were also a large global player and we needed to spend. But yeah, I would say that was the most fascinating part of my career, traveling with the circus of Formula One for 2 years. Unbelievable experience. I don't think I can match it.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I think we're all a little bit jealous, probably. It's a lifestyle that a lot of us would like to live, the F1 lifestyle. You mentioned going back to school. So you have a master's in finance from the University of Brussels. I'm the dean of a business school, so we're probably pretty biased crowd up here. But talk about, when you're thinking about sponsorship measurement and ROI, the financial side versus the go with your gut, and then all of the intangibles and other objectives we talk about. But given your background in finance and banking, how do you rationalize those pieces, gut, intangibles, and then the financial returns?
Yeah, I think I thought about it when I saw the question. I was like, let me think this through. But as a banker, I did mergers and acquisitions, I did derivatives trading. And so we always use data to make our decisions and look at the market. But at the end of the day, it's finding the right story and following your gut. Of course, you look at the data and of course, you look at the trends. At the same time, it's just like storytelling and sponsorship. You have to find the right story, follow your gut based on all the context. But still, there's a lot of storytelling. I call it storytelling. Like I used to write a daily review on currency markets for our clients. And same thing, like you look at the data and sure, you can just tell people what you're seeing on the screen, but that's not the story, right? And so it's following your gut based on your experience and you learn. But see, I think I go back of course, for me as a finance person or background in finance, I always go back to, okay, what is it going to deliver? right? Based on the objectives. Like that's always my first instinct. But I think it's still like reading the data and you know finding the right context and finding the right story. I think it's very similar to reading a financial report.
Yeah, it made me think of a this is off cuff
Okay.
question. So one of the research projects I've been part of, we interviewed some CEOs of large, CPG companies, global, and one of the CEOs talked about getting out of an automobile as an NASCAR sponsorship because they kept asking the team, why is this helping us? Why don't I just lower the price of our product? They could have used you on that. So if a CEO was to ask that question, given your background, the auto racing world,
Hmm.
the financial piece, and if the CEO or CFO is all about what's the ROI on this, but the team doesn't have that direct answer, how do you go about responding to that?
The team, as in the racing team.
The team, those are the marketing team of the brand that wants to do it, and they kind of get trumped by their CEO, right?
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to, and I think a lot of people tend to overcomplicate measurement and figuring out what to measure, what not to measure. And we'll talk about like real-time data
Yeah.
and being able to access this. Like at the end of the day, and I had this conversation with Dawn, a dear friend at IMI, over the weekend. It Measurement is not hard. It really isn't. It's just figuring out the basic measurement, guide sticks. And so when we looked at Formula One racing, one of our internal clients was private banking, and they were like, "How is this going to help us outside of hosting?" And our CEO challenged us. He's like, "You guys need to figure out the right metric to find that ROI. Like, what is it delivering to us?" And so we started really looking at, okay, which private bankers are we going to invite? Which clients are we going to invite? What is the amount of funds that we have from their family trust? How much can we grow it? Can we grow it? Can we acquire a new client? And everything was tracked. And so you get a real financial ROI in that case. And I think it's helping CEOs and executives teams understand that. And I think it's still something that is overlooked. Like I think a lot of brands, I challenge anybody in at SPX, like any brand, can you articulate in 3 bullets your key objectives based on your strategy? And I think a lot of them will be challenged.
That's a great answer. They certainly could have used you. So now I'm sure a lot of people are thinking all this background. Give us an idea of what a typical day for you at YouGov looks like. Like, what do you do day to day? What does your job look like? What do you do for the organization?
Yeah, so I manage a sports portfolio. I obviously have to generate business, so it's always talking with clients. But I'm not a pure sales guy. Like I'm not a shark. For me, it's relationship driven sales. Like I love connecting, engaging with clients. I love helping clients understand why. So why do you need research? Instead of like, hey, you can buy this research, it's amazing. But why do you need it? How can you use it? So I always start my day with just typical, I would say, read through the news. I'm an early riser. I wake up at 5 a.m., read the news, go through all my newsletters, kind of get an idea what's happening, what's going on. Very much like when I was a banker. It's very similar. Like read the news, read the trends, kind of get up to speed. Um, Typically, I'll go into our real-time data platforms, have a look at what key brands how they're doing. Like the whole tariff conversation is really interesting because we do daily tracking. And so we can see, and we track more than 450 brands. And by the way, I'm not going to make this into a sales pitch for YouGov, but as we're talking about real-time data, so we started looking at Tim Hortons versus Starbucks. We started looking at how Tesla is doing against other car brands or non-American brands. We started looking at how Tim Hortons is doing, Canadian Tire is doing against Home Depot. And so since the tariffs started, you can see a significant divergence of brand consideration, loyalty very, very quickly. And, you're talking 5-10%, like percentage points, like significant differences. And so like that's what I kind of do. I kind of go through the data, talk to clients. I love working with data, so I kind of get carried away because you have access to it. And yeah, and just work with clients on a daily basis, calls, meetings. But I really enjoy working in sports, and I'll just say this: like what I really like about working in sports, and you don't find that in banking, you don't find that in with physicians, you don't find that in any other industry. And there's a flip side to it because they're so passionate. But it's the fact that everybody you work with on the right shoulder side, even on the brand side, maybe to a lesser extent, but then on the right shoulder side, everybody is so passionate about what they do, and you don't find it anywhere else. And I think that's the fun part, right? Like you work with people who love their sport, who love their team, who love their league. Whether it's a large or a small property, you're very passionate. And I think that's such a unique feature of working in sports, which I really, really enjoy.
As a marketer, you're often told, listen to your customer. Sometimes they're going to tell you what they want. Other times they're going to give you clues of what you want. That's why me and the Sponsorship X team have created what we're calling SPX Basecamp. This is a high elevation experience for marketing leaders. If you're responsible for growth and brand development in your organization, or perhaps you're an entrepreneur, or perhaps you're a change maker, then Basecamp is for you. August 14th to 16th in Whistler, British Columbia. You're not going to come into a setting with keynote presentations and lots of PowerPoint. In fact, there aren't going to be any screens. You're going to work together collaboratively with your peers. You're going to be guided by expert facilitators who are consultants and thought leaders from around the world. And you're going to sit down and face this opportunity to decide, what is your future going to look like? How are you going to get your organization there? And how are you going to personally reinvent yourself to make sure that happens? August 14th to 16th, Whistler, British Columbia. Sign up today, sponsorshipx.com/basecamp.
Yeah, great answer. And we'll move into our topic now. I think you made your examples there of Canadian Tire and Tim's and the Tesla movement. If you're using market research data from December 2024, it's useless, right? So this real-time thing we're talking about. So a two-part question for you. So tell us a little bit about your background in sponsorship measurement, and then kind of what has you most excited about all of the advances and things that are happening in real-time data collection. So your background and then how you see this.
Yeah, I think
excited.
I've had exposure to pretty much everything within market research, whether it's media valuation, whether it's holistic valuation, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, social listening. Like I think I've seen the full spectrum of things. I think there's definitely value when it comes to real-time data. We have access to real-time data, as real-time as it can get within traditional market research outside of media. I think it's fascinating to see. I think you have to really think about how critical is it. Is it correct, the data that you're getting in real time? So I think that's always something you have to keep in mind. Where like you can get real time access to social listening, but is there an error? Is it true? Does it make sense? And then how can you use it? We definitely see clients more and more using real time data on our market, like on our traditional research platform, because we have daily updates, which is really powerful. I think when I think about real-time data on the other side of the equation, the media piece, social listening, media exposure, you can get a bunch of things, but there's also a lot of things you'll be missing if you talk about real-time, because you depend on ratings, you depend on viewership data, which typically takes 2, 3, 4 weeks. So there's definitely things that you can track on an ongoing basis, but I'm always looking at, like, okay, so but what does it mean? Is it valuable? And we're going to talk about how do you make sure you don't get overwhelmed by data, right? So I think there's definitely application for sure, and we have it in spades on the market research side, and we definitely have examples of clients using it. But I think you always have to think about, is this data that we're getting on an ongoing basis? Is it true? Is it statistically relevant? Does it represent the sample? I always go back to, it has to be real. It has to be legit. Yeah.
And I think you've almost answered the next question, and clearly you know your stuff as you just mentioned. The how do you define real-time sponsorship data, and then try to do that succinctly, which is tricky, I know. And then why is it critical to the sport and entertainment industry?
So real-time data for me, on the market research side of things, so traditional market research, We do it daily. For me, that is as real time as you can get it. It's an it's a national representative sample. We have, I think, 700,000 people in our panel in Canada, 30 million worldwide. Like that is as real time as you can get it. Gets updated daily. So there's a lot of power in there, and we'll talk about a couple of examples as well where it's been used. I think on the media side of things, when you think about media exposure, social listening, I think there's a lot there. But again, I think you have to be really careful what you do with it and how you work with it. I think there's a lot of application in fine tuning campaigns or assessing risk when things don't go well. But it also demands a very close relationship with the rights holder. Because as a brand, you may be able to access that data, and then you're like, we want to fine tune X, Y, or Z. And the rights holder is like, I don't think so. It's not in a contract. They don't have the resources. They don't have that data. So I think we're just at the early stages of how real-time data can be applied and used. I think it's going to increase in importance. But at the same time, as you know, sponsorship is a long-term play. And so is daily data going to help you in fine-tuning and really changing direction? No, I personally don't think so. Can it help you fine-tune, optimize? Can it help you mitigate risk when something happens? I think there's a lot there.
That's great, and a couple of the key things I think that maybe people want to hear is one is daily or more often than daily, and two, a sufficient sample size, and that seems like a couple of the key factors. Great. What are some of the misperceptions that people in our industry have out there about real-time data?
I think a lot of people may think that it's the new best big thing. I don't think so. I go back to the basics. Like, try to figure out your basics first. Try to use market research properly, apply it properly, deploy it properly. Again, like I think there's a lot of value in it, but I think it has to be used with caution. But going back to daily tracking, so typically, as you well know, market research is mostly reactive. Something happens in the market, and you want to look at the impact of that. You're basically too late. Unless you have a baseline before the event, you can't really measure what the impact was as it's unfolding, as it's happening. So I think this is a great application of like real-time market research data through panels. Because we track daily, it basically avoids the need of doing reactive market research. And I can talk about a couple of examples where it's been used, but I think that's where I see a lot of application in real-time data. Yeah.
So that proactive, really important versus
Yeah.
reactive. That's really, really good. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools and techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working our way down here, so we're getting into the nitty gritty. So in your experience, what are the most effective tools and techniques available to us or to agencies out there to track sponsorship impact or effectiveness in real time?
I mean, there's a lot of tools available when I go back to social media space, social listening. There's a lot of great tools available. I think as whether you're an agency or a rights holder or a brand, do your homework, figure out what is being provided, ask the right questions. I think I've helped clients when I was an independent consultant, help them understand the different providers of market research and help them ask the right questions. And I think that's really critical. Like, don't jump in with somebody or with a company without really knowing how are they capturing the data, how frequent, what is the sample, what CPMs are they using, where are they getting their CPMs, so you can really have confidence in the data. I think that's something that people just don't think about. Like, it's overlooked. But as academics, as people who are in the industry, that's what we do. We want to understand where the data is coming from and the information is coming from, so we can trust the data. So I think there's a lot. There's a plenty of tools available. I mean, we have a bunch of tools available on the market research side of things. I mean, there's no lack of tools. I think it's finding the right ones that work for you. Again, go back to what you want to track, right? Like, go back to the basics, have a clear understanding of what you want to achieve. I always say s- start with the basics on market research. Understand your audience. Well, be able to articulate your objectives properly. Have a good understanding of your audience. Have a good understanding of your potential customers. I think that's something we don't talk enough about. Everybody talks about, oh, we want to do more with our clients, and I'm like, but what about your competitors' clients? Like those are the ones you should be interested in as well. Having a good understanding of that. But I think start with the basics. Do it really, really well, because you can invest in, you know, three, four, five different platforms. You spend a ton of money. Ask yourself, do I have the resources to actually do something with that? Can I use it? Do I have the means to deploy it properly? So start slowly, and get into it before jumping, like full on, and have every tool available without really having the ability to understand it, deploy it. And that's both on the brand side and the rights holder side, right?
Yeah, that's great advice, and then you really could extend it to any system, right? Don't just put it in because it's a technology. It needs to fit. That's really, really good. So, can you walk us through a specific example? Take a second to think about it if you need to, of how real-time data has shaped a sponsorship, activation, or campaign. If like, and how your role or YouGov's role, but how a recent example of how real-time data has shaped a sponsorship, activation, or campaign.
Yeah, there's a couple of examples. When Hockey Canada went through their troubles a couple of years ago, had a massive impact on the organization, had a significant impact on the sponsors. I mean, horrible stories came out. But because, again, we had the research in place and we had the tracking in place, we helped brands and Hockey Canada understand on an ongoing basis what was going on. And basically, on a daily basis, they would keep track of how's our brand awareness, how's our loyalty. The sponsors were interested as well. And so I think that's one example where we really saw a benefit. I mean, it was a horrible situation, but again, it really helped partners understand and Hockey Canada understand. We saw it with a couple of years ago. There was a massive outage with Rogers over the summer. Um, Rogers is a client of ours, and I think, they had access to our system, and it's really easy to use. I mean, you've used it. It's really easy, but they have access to the system, and still they didn't think about using the data properly. And so what I like to do is help clients understand what can you do with the data, and they don't think about it. And so we told Rogers, like, look, you have access to all this data on an ongoing basis, and you can see impact of what's going on. And so in times of crises, it is a fantastic tool to have real-time tracking, social listening as well, like being able to address the concerns of your fans, of your clients. I think is really critical, but you have to be on top of it. But I think those are a couple of examples where we really use our tools from daily tracking for sure.
Right. So when you have this real-time data available, and you could use the three examples you started with up front, in Canadian Tire, Tim Hortons,
Mm-hmm.
car manufacturers. You talked about Hockey Canada. So when these issues happen, you're ready, right?
Yep.
When the CEO or the CFO calls, you can track. That's really, really good. When you think about decision-making processes, so let's do one from the brand side and one from the property or the rights holder side. So if a brand is deciding, which property to invest in for a sponsorship, how can they use real-time data in making that decision?
I I debate if real-time data will really drive that decision. I think, again, go back to the basics, use foundational data as a starting point. Um, I think it can help drive decision making in terms of like doing like social listening and seeing how fans react to certain things. I think it can be very helpful. Is it going to drive the end decision? I
What if we link it back to your Hockey Canada example? So if I'm
Mhm.
one of Hockey Canada's sponsors, when this emerged, the horrible story that you talked about,
Mhm.
and some moved, some came back, some disappeared, could it help in that context as you see what Canadians are
Yes,
thinking?
100%. And we saw that, right? So we worked with brands, understand what was happening. We worked with Hockey Canada, understand what was happening. I think it was very valuable in, decisions that were made from brands that were not always, positive for Hockey Canada. But as a syndicated product, we provide data whoever wants to access it. So it's not proprietary, and we work with clients on both sides of the fence. But I think it definitely helped with decision making, 100%, making the right decision for them and at that particular time. I think for Hockey Canada, it really helped them understand, because in the beginning they kind of were like, well, I don't think they ever underestimated or underplayed what was happening, but I think they didn't really understand the impact it was having on the organization and on the brand. So we looked at consideration, purchase intent amongst hockey fans and Hockey Canada fans, and it dipped. Like, it didn't dip, it crashed. And so for them to understand that better as an organization really made them realize, like, yeah, we need to really act on this, and we can't sit still. And so I think it helped. So we worked with the executive team and the board and made sure they understood. And I mean, the data is the data. You can't hide behind it. Right?
No, that's good. You actually answered the next question with Hockey Canada. That was really good, really good. And so it's both the brands and the properties, that real time in certain contexts. To your point, in a lot of cases, it's not going to be helpful, but in a lot, especially high pressure situations or when populations are changing their views at a short, it can be really, really useful. So talk about, you hinted at this a bit earlier, but the the data overwhelmingness that's out there now, and brands particularly are dealing with that. How do you navigate the huge amount of data, the skills that are required to make sense of it? What's your advice to brands in terms of managing the mountain of data that's available or that they have?
A really good question, and it's definitely a challenge. Even working with brands or rights holders who are sophisticated and have the internal capacity, we see a wide range of competencies and abilities. I think rights holders are still struggling. I think they like to say that they have the best market research and they're using it well. I would challenge that. I think there's still a lot of lack of resources. On the brand side, there's definitely more focus on research, more and more. In terms of overwhelming data, I think, and we notice this as well with clients, right? They have online access to our tools, and it's great, but still they want to see their nice little PowerPoint report, and then they get this nice little PowerPoint report, and they're like, afterwards, they're like, yeah, but it doesn't really hit it for us. Like, it didn't cover X, Y, and Z. And so you work on a 150-page document that doesn't do it for the client, and you're like, well, that was a waste of time. So I think the advice would be, work with your vendors and figure out what the right reporting is for you. And I think it's something that is overlooked. Like, we'll put together a PDF or PowerPoint report, and we'll put this and this in, and then afterwards the client is like, I couldn't really use it because it didn't address X, Y, Z. And then they're disappointed. You're frustrated because you weren't able to deliver on their objective. So I think working with the vendor and having a really good understanding of what they deliver, how they deliver it, and does it meet your internal objectives of what you want to achieve with that research? I think that's so easy and yet so overlooked.
And that's really well said. I think about, when we work together, sometimes you just need a very quick data nugget, right? What do Canadian women think about this? But sometimes you want the data set to plug into your model. So you're right, having that flexibility, really, really good, and a great way to navigate the mountain of data. Sometimes you want someone else to analyze it for you. That's
Right.
really, really well said.
We'll be right back to the Sponsorship X podcast. But first, a quick word from Explore Edmonton. What if your next event didn't just entertain? What if it created a movement? In Edmonton, game changers live here and they come to play. This is a city that dares to do things differently. In sport, in community, in culture. Edmonton doesn't just host events, it creates launch pads for change. From the legendary Edmonton grads to Olympic stars like the Plouffe sisters, women's sports has deep roots in Edmonton and a bold future. On our courts and on our pitches, legacies are written. In our arenas and stadiums, records are broken. Because here, it's not just about the win, it's about what you leave behind. Whether you're an athlete, an organizer, or a fan, if you're ready to rewrite the rules, Edmonton is your stage. Legacy isn't just remembered here, it's built. Game changers live here. Change the game, create your legacy. Visit thisisthegame.ca.
I'm going to we've got about 14 minutes left, so I'm going to add a question in here that we talked a little bit over breakfast this morning. And a lot of the real-time data, and this is I'm reframing what Yoeri told me and asking it back to you. A lot of the real-time data is about awareness, right? And about that brand awareness piece. And a lot of those, I'm a marketing professor, a lot of the thing about marketing, historically we've talked about cognitive. What do you think about something? Effective. What does it really mean? And then behavior. Do you buy it? Do you use it? Whatever. And so your big point was that middle step has really been lost in the real-time kind of data revolution. And we think a lot about just, are people aware of us? And that's the delivery, that's the conversation. How many clicks, how many likes, how many follows? But what did it really mean for the brand? I thought you said some really good things. So maybe you could talk a bit about that, and then how we might be able to better measure, share that with brands and properties. I know that's off the cuff and not an easy question, but thought we'd ask
We
you
did
that.
talk about it. So I think I brought it up a little bit, but when I was at ING, fifth largest brand in the world, we had all these different verticals. We had 7 lines of business. People knew about ING, but then again, they didn't understand it. And I think I haven't heard anybody here at SPX. Maybe I should have raised my hand and be like, hey, what about this? But I think brand awareness is great. If you have a descriptive brand name, which is really unusual that it covers the entire business. But what do you actually do as a business? And so with ING, we implemented a very simple, I didn't come up with it, it was our agency, but we implemented a very simple tactic to help with that brand understanding, business understanding. And so we started using business descriptors. Very simple. We had ING, and based on the market or geography we were in, we had insurance, asset management, and banking. In other markets, it was leasing, real estate, and some other things, life insurance. Very simple. And on everything we produced, every single thing of collateral, we had ING, the 3 business descriptors, and always a URL. And so we started we spent a lot of money on market research, looking at, did it actually have an effect on the understanding of our business? Did we see more click-throughs on the website going to retail banking? Or did we get more wholesale clients? And we actually saw a significant spike over the years of understanding of our business. And it really helped shareholder value as well. Actually, our shares went up. So as our executive team, at the end of the day, that's what they look at, right? What is our share price? Are we delivering ROI on our investors? And so we were very consistent. And I think that's the other thing about market research. Like, once you figure out your baseline, once you can articulate your objectives, once you have your right metrics in place, please be consistent and use the same metrics, use the same methodology, be consistent. And I think that is going to be, and it's not hard, it's not expensive, but I think thinking about that consistency in tracking will really help you figure out what the gaps are. And for us, as a bank, the key driver was like not only brand awareness, but brand understanding. Like, do they understand what we do? And that was a massive gap that we had. So we did market research in, I think, 30, 40 countries, open-ended question, focus groups, and we saw a significant increase. And so that was a major objective of going into Formula One racing, was increasing that understanding of our business. And I think it's overlooked. Like, I saw the presentation of Thorn yesterday. It took the lady, I think, 5 to 10 minutes to actually say that they are a supplement company. And I went on my phone and looked it up. It should have been done right away. Use the opportunity to tell what your business does, whether it's through design, whether it's through logo updates, communication, but use the opportunity to explain what you do, because Thorn doesn't mean a thing to me. And now I know, because I was in the presentation and I actually looked it up. But I think that is so overlooked.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And for a takeaway for a lot of people, you think about the old 80-20 rule, right? Like, what do those core customers, like you give the example, really feel about our brand versus chasing getting all these other people to be aware of it when they're never going to engage anyways, right?
Right.
Great examples. Thank you. So we got a couple of questions about the future, then we'll wrap with some rapid fire questions. So when you think about real time, and this is really challenging with the evolution of technology and what's happening out there, but you think about the next 3 to 5 years, go a little bit shorter if you like. What do you see happening in real time sponsorship, data analysis, evaluation? If you can layer in things like machine learning and AI and just all of the systems and advances that are coming into play, where do you see it going?
Look, I think the capabilities are only going to increase, and the quality is only going to improve. I think that's a fact. Like it is happening. We could talk about machine learning. We're talking about AI. Like it's going to help us digest data faster, understand data faster. I think you still have to be wary that you're actually reading the right things and doing your fact checking and making sure that it is right. But I think in order for that to have an impact, all the parties need to work together. The brand may be very on top of real-time data and everything at its fingertips and know how to use it, which I think will happen more and more. If the other side of the equation, the rights holder or the agency in the middle, is not on that same page or doesn't have that sophistication,
Right.
it's going to collide, right? And I think that's going to be a challenge. But we like, I think when I think about AI, how I use ChatGPT, I use it on an ongoing basis. I absolutely love it. It's
Do
like
you have the premium or do you use
I
the basic?
I have the
Yeah.
premium, yeah. So it learns about what I input, and I use it on like a daily basis. Basically, I even tell my kids to use it. But I think going through, when I look at our data, like as a market researcher and our millions of data points, we already integrated AI as a search tool. So you can type in the question, like, I want to learn more about women in sports. And it'll go through all the data points and the questions that are relevant to that topic. I think the next step is really not just as a search tool, but as an interpretation tool. And I think that's where it's going to really accelerate the ease of interpreting data. Because, you know it well, I know it well. It's easy to read statistics for us. That doesn't mean it's easy for the end user. And I think that's where I see AI being a really powerful tool in terms of like making it easier to understand, making it easier to digest, making sense to it. How do you deploy it? I see a lot of application in there.
Yeah, and maybe it will also help back to your earlier point about getting deeper than awareness into the kind of the effect brand association piece. AI has that ability
Yeah.
where some of our traditional digital metrics do not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you always have to think about, is the data, statistically sound? Like we always go back to that. Like, is the panel sufficient? Is the sample size of this particular question sufficient? You always have to go back to the basics, and that won't change, right? Like, you still have to talk to a population that is relevant and represents the audience that you want to talk to.
And the quality of AI data is always questionable, right? I
Yes.
mean, we haven't nailed that for sure. All right, we're right up against the end here. So there's 8 questions left. I'm going to read them, so I apologize for that. And you have been given, according to my notes, 3 seconds, which is hard for someone like you or I to do, but 3 seconds to answer each of these questions. So are you ready for that?
Yeah.
All right. So number 1, if you could only work in one city for the rest of your career, where would it be?
Amsterdam.
Good choice. What's the most interesting sponsorship campaign you've ever worked on?
I have to say Formula One.
What is your favorite sport to watch and why?
I'm Flemish, cycling.
You can answer the why. I'll give you another 10 seconds. Why? Oh, because you're Flemish.
I'm Flem. I
guess
grew
you
up in
didn't
it.
answer, didn't you?
It's like a religion in Belgium, and so I grew up with it. I love it. I love every aspect of it. The team side, the racing. Yeah, I just love it.
If you could have dinner with any leader in sports or business, who would it be?
The new CEO of the International Olympic Committee. Forgot her name, but first female.
Oh my God, that's terrible. Someone help us out. Female, Australian. Terrible.
Anyway,
Yes,
I
yes.
think that would be because she's the first woman
Amazing.
of the International Olympic Committee. Now you want to look it up.
Someone yell it out for us behind the podcast so we don't look so terrible. What's the one thing you've learned? I would agree that's a great choice. Yes, thank you. Olympic medalist, whole thing. What's one thing you've learned from your background in finance that still helps you today?
Analytics.
What's the best advice you've ever received in your career?
My boss told me once I put a deck together. My boss in the middle, my direct boss said it's not good, and I was like, "Ah, man, I think it's really good." And then my vice president told me, "I am so disappointed in you that you didn't follow your gut." And it was like, and I had a lot of respect for her. I loved her as a boss. And it was like a stab, and I vowed to myself I will never, ever do that again.
That's good. Really good. That's a takeaway. What's the next big trend in sponsorships that you're excited about?
I mean, not because we're doing it, but I would say women in sports. I'm really excited to see a new branch in sports sponsorships and see what it can do. And I think it's overdue. It has its place 100%. I think that's really exciting to me.
And we won't. I know we're not music people, but tell us what are you most excited about for the Junos tonight?
I love like I'm not like a music connoisseur, but I love live music. I always have a lot of respect for live performers, whether it's theater, whether it's arts, whether it's music. I'm always in awe of being able to put you out there and doing what you love. Yeah.
Wonderful, perfect. So, Kirsty Coventry, is going to have dinner with you shortly.
Yes.
First, so we can protect ourselves. First female president of the IOC, I believe Zimbabwe. It's all coming back to me. And 2-time or 3-time Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah.
It's an amazing step forward. She beat a bunch of white men in the election. So hopefully that's all good.
Yes.
The way the world is now. And you let us know how that dinner goes, because I would love to do that too. So I think this was really great. Let's give Yoeri a quick round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think if you could summarize some of the really big things, the basics came across really good. So if you're going to do, no matter how you do it, you need to have a sufficient sample size, right? And daily or better. That's a couple of things I took away. Proactivity over reactivity. And we all know that from sponsorship evaluation, but you made that point many, many times over, which is really important. This really, I think, interesting contribution that you mentioned, moving from just brand awareness into effect or associations, like what does that brand really mean for people versus that overall, kind of piece is important. And then even with the last one, I would say, even with all these advances in AI and everything, you still need to have, you're really focused, fit into your strategy, only have a system that makes sense to you, those kind of pieces. Those are the 5 big takeaways I got from this morning. It was really, really good. And thank you again for your time, Yoeri.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.